The Monsters That Made Us is brought to you by the Cage Club Podcast Network. For all things movies, music, media, monsters, and more, head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Today we head back to ancient Egypt for one last Scorpion King adventure. Armed with the fabled Fang of Anubis, a sword that is fueled by the souls of its enemies, the Nubian god king Nebsarek embarks on a bloody quest for vengeance, seeking the last Akkadian and conquering every kingdom in his path. And now Matthias, no longer the Scorpion King, but a humble blacksmith, must rely on the aid of a Nubian warrior, Tala, as they traverse the desert, cross enemy territory, through the Valley of the 13th Moon, and into the Temple of Scrolls to locate the one item capable of destroying the Fang of Anubis, the Book of Souls, which is said to contain the names of all those slain by the mystical sword. But as Matthias will soon learn, the book may not actually be a book at all. And now the old Scorpion King, along with some new companions, must once again get to the bottom of another mysterious artifact and save the realm from one last bloodthirsty warlord. Prepare to fight with honor and watch out for golems as we discuss the Scorpion King Book of Souls.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
Listen to them, children of the night.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? I'll show you who I am and what I am.
You're insane. I tell you, I killed a wolf, a plain, ordinary wolf.
By studying these and other species, we add to our knowledge of how life evolved, how it adapted itself to this world.
He went for a little walk. He could have seen his face.
Welcome to the Return of the Monsters That Made Us, the podcast where we celebrate the spooktacular characters and films in the Universal Studios Classic Monsters series. Today we're talking about the final installment in the Scorpion King saga, 2018's The Scorpion King Book of Souls. I'm the invisible Dan Colon, and joining me as always is my co-host, quite possibly our own Book of Souls, Monster Mike Manzi. How are you, Mike?
Hey, Dan. So I think I might be half Gollum. Pretty sure I swallowed a piece of paper that said podcast on it in 2015.
Here we are, after 5 films, 4 of them straight to video, with 4 different lead actors. We finally reached the end of the Scorpion King saga. But despite our hopes that these sequels would eventually connect to the original Scorpion King, do you remember talking about that back in the first Scorpion King episode, I believe? Book of Souls does not conclude Matthias' journey. Instead, he rides off into the sunset towards his next adventure, an indication, possibly, that Universal wanted to at least keep their options open for future sequels. But as we know, plans for a 4th Mummy film involving the O'Connells were ultimately scrapped in favor of building an altogether new Mummy from which to launch their ill-fated Dark Universe, effectively ending any chances of future Scorpion King sequels. But with 2017's The Mummy failing to perform at the box office and the Dark Universe dead on arrival, there may still be hope for more Scorpion King in our future. In 2020, Deadline reported that a Scorpion King reboot was in the works to be produced by Dwayne Johnson and Danny and Hiram Garcia, the producers of Baywatch, Rampage, the Jumanji films, Hobbs and Shaw, Black Adam, basically every Dwayne Johnson film since 2017. The script is said to be written by Straight Outta Compton screenwriter Jonathan Herman and is supposed to be set in modern day. So maybe there's some more life in the Scorpion King after all.
Fingers crossed.
Before we get into the Book of Souls specifically, I gotta ask, Mike, how do you feel about this detour we've taken through the only real spin-off franchise from the Universal Studios Monsters universe? Did it live up to your expectations? How has it surprised you, if at all? And how well do you feel that it fits in with the greater context of the Universal Monsters legacy?
You know, I am glad we decided to do this in the long run, if not only because it made the quote-unquote real movies more enjoyable. It might be a little harsh. There's no mystery that these are not the greatest films out there, but I did have a lot of fun reviewing them with you, even if they weren't the best movies. I loved the cameos, were insane. Some of the cast on a lot of these kept it alive. You know, Billy Zane, Ron Perlman showed up. That's been a lot of fun. I was frustrated with the lack of continuity. Obviously, we had like a prequel, a sequel, another requel. Like we had everything you could ask for was kind of there that they did with this franchise over 5 movies. Some were definitely better than others. Some were genuinely enjoyable. I dare say, I think this was tonight one of the better ones by far. One of the least convoluted. It kind of stays in its lane. It doesn't really try to overreach. It knows pretty much what it's up to. And I dare say it almost gets us where we need to be by the end. So close. This was fun. I'm shocked that it was Scorpion King, I guess, that spun off into anything. But I guess I'm also just glad we got anything extra to watch along our way. So might not have been the best idea, but it turned out to be a good one.
It's lacking in monsters, right? I don't think the genre is the issue. I think that there's no real iconic monster at the center of it. There are obviously monsters and creatures throughout, but to think of these movies as part of the Universal Monsters legacy is so strange to me because they don't feel the same. It is a strange thing to spin off from one of the monster films. So I think that it has a little bit of a hard time, like sort of finding its place within that sphere. But like you, I had a really good time watching these, and I thought for better or worse, it would be interesting to see how Universal would handle a spin-off franchise from the Universal Monsters universe. Ultimately, that's what compelled me to want to go down this road, right? Because in the 30s and 40s, they didn't do straight to video, right? That wasn't a thing. And so this was like the first time they had ever done it, you know, for good or ill. I thought it was worth examining because it is part of this history. Like you, I don't regret having gone down this road. Or am I going to watch any of these movies again? Probably not anytime soon. But I think it was an interesting experiment. And I think we learned a lot about the evolution of a studio coming into the 2000s and how they're going to treat these characters in a more modern era.
I think that's an interesting point, that there is no central monster at the core of any of this Scorpion King stuff,
Right.
you know, that it is him, the Scorpion. It would be as if like the Frankenstein movies were only about the doctor who never made a monster. There's something kind of off about that. I do appreciate though, and I think you may as well, this sort of sword and sandal aspect of all of these movies that they tried to infuse it with. You know, we're big Conan fans, so we like that side of it as much as they could draw from, but that also seems like a weird genre to mix into the monster movie mayhem. At least give us a big octopus creature from beneath the earth like Conan fought, like something Lovecraftian that we could sort of build to. But yeah, we didn't really get that close.
Yeah, I think that's sort of maybe what I'm getting at, is that it doesn't really feel like we are building to the creation of a monster, right? Matthias will eventually become this giant scorpion kind of monster. And these movies are not really interested in exploring this character's evolution toward that end. Yeah, they're just sort of standalone Conan the Barbarian style sword and sandal adventures, which are totally fine. And I'm not even knocking the genre. As we've talked about many times, you know, these characters, these monsters are very malleable and can be tailored to suit just about any genre. I don't think sword and sandal films are exempt from that. But I think if these films had been more interested in exploring his, you know, humble beginnings and then his evolution into the monster he would eventually become, that would have been really cool to see. But it's not really interested in any of that. Even in this fifth and final film, it doesn't end even hinting at that future that is to come. And so I think that's where it loses me ultimately, is that, am I going to think of the Scorpion King? Am I going to think of Matthias in the same breath as Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy, the Invisible Man? Probably not.
No.
I think that's kind of where I'm of two minds. I think it's an interesting experiment on the studio's part, and it was fun to talk about them. But for me, I think the Scorpion King will always feel separate from the greater whole.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those odd reference that we can sort of pull out, you know, and just talk about all this. Someone mentions the Universal Monsters and we can be like, oh, what about Matthias? Like the Canadian, you know, he was the Scorpion King. They did do 5 movies about him, but like I would never do that. But I'm just saying it's kind of funny. Like that's the only position we're in with this material right now. It's like, it's just like a very obscure reference for us. The main point, I think, is what you were saying about how he didn't turn into the monster at the end. Episode 5 or whatever it is. The fact that they didn't even show him Clash of the Titans style, like claymation and shadow, like morphing into a creature right before the credits like, I would have taken that. But instead, the narrator just kind of trails off as like, maybe one day this will connect to one of those mummy movies we made.
I mean, it does get kind of close with some of the elements. I mean, we know that Matthias ultimately made a deal with Anubis,
Mhm.
the god Anubis, and he was given a jackal army. We get not a literal jackal army in this movie, but we do get one. This movie flirts with some of the ideas presented in that Scorpion King mythology that we're familiar with from The Mummy Returns, but it never really pulls the trigger on it. You know, to get back to Book of Souls specifically, I think I agree with you. I think this is definitely one of the better Scorpion King sequels. It looks really good. A lot of the action feels pretty clean. The story is straightforward. And I think it's my second favorite of the Scorpion King movies overall after the original spin-off film. The biggest mark I have against it is the actor they chose to play Matthias.
Exactly.
It's like he didn't get the notes that he has to be kind of smarmy as this character. He's so serious throughout the entire movie. And I don't want to necessarily blame the actor. I feel like that's the director's fault for not pulling that performance out of him. It's strange because I don't think he's a bad actor. I just don't think he's playing Matthias.
Right.
And that really brings down the energy of the movie, right? Because Matthias is supposed to be kind of loose and fun and quippy, but he is none of these things.
Yeah. He is definitely my big complaint about the film, which is tragic when he's the main character, right?
Right,
It's like,
right.
I like everything else going on. And if only they did a better job of Matthias in this movie, I think the whole movie would be elevated. Like, there's so much for one of the other actors. There's so much opportunity here where I was like, oh, if it was one of the previous guys, like, he'd have owned this scene, like him and the Gollum stuff, like that would have been so much better. I gotta also say is like, it doesn't look anything like the Scorpion King. You know, like, all the other actors at least seem like they could be related. This guy is like blue eyes. He's totally white. Like, he does not belong out there in the desert. I was just like having a really hard time connecting with him on a visual level to be like, not my Scorpion King. I'm sorry. Like, I get you can have anyone of color play any character you want, right? But we just had 4 guys in a row who they looked very similar. You know, it looked to be like they were defining the role for a type of actor. Then they bring in a completely different type of actor. Like, he's much thinner. He's not as much as like a wrestler type of guy with his movements. Like, it's just a whole different vibe that I wasn't really feeling.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a common trend, but I don't want to harp on that because he
Right.
does strike me as a good actor. I feel like maybe if the movie wasn't The Scorpion King, I would feel very differently about it. I feel oddly protective of Matthias as a character, right? Who would have thought that was going to happen? But
Yeah.
it's suddenly I'm like, no, this isn't my Matthias, like you said, not my Scorpion King. And so it almost repels me in a weird way. You know, like I said, if this wasn't Scorpion King, I probably wouldn't mind it quite so much because he strikes me as a good actor. You know, like I said, I don't think it's his fault. I think it's the director for not recognizing that and getting him to play the character differently. I guess that we can get into the movie now. I don't have a ton of notes, as you can probably imagine. The 5th in the Scorpion King franchise, there's not a ton of information on the production of this. It was produced by Mike Elliott, returning. He was the Scorpion King 4 producer. You can learn more about him in our Scorpion King 4 episode, but basically he is a guy who has really made a name for himself as a producer of straight-to-DVD sequels. If you look him up on IMDb, it's just nothing but Death Race sequels and
Tremor sequels.
This was directed by Don Michael Paul. Now, Paul began as an actor. He made his film debut in the 1984 comedy called Love Lines. His most well-known film is probably 1989's Heart of Dixie, starring Ali Sheedy, Virginia Madsen, and Phoebe Cates. Not one I've seen personally, but I love all 3 of those lead actors. He also tried his hand at screenwriting, with his first being 1991's neo-western Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, with Mickey Rourke and Don Johnson. He began directing TV in 1996 and then made the leap to films in 2002 with Half Past Dead, starring Steven Seagal, Morris Chestnut, and Ja Rule. He also wrote and directed the 2007 comedy Who's Your Caddy? His career is all over the place. But in the years since, it looks like he's probably hooked up with Mike Elliott because most of his films have been straight-to-DVD Tremors, Death Race, and Jarhead sequels.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah, so that's probably
Respect.
how he got this job, I'm guessing. The screenplay was co-written by David Alton Hedges and Frank DeJohn. It is the one and only feature-length screenplay that each of them has written. Nothing before or since. Wish I had more
That's okay. We got what we get.
Let's get into the cast now. Zach
Yes.
McGowan plays Matthias, the Scorpion King. Now, McGowan is an American actor from good old New York City. He began acting on television in '07, appearing in episodes of CSI Miami, Numbers, Cold Case, before eventually joining the cast of Shameless in 2012. And since then, he's worked primarily as a TV actor. He was a series regular or a recurring cast member on Black Sails, The 100, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and The Walking Dead. He's done a few movies as well, of course. And if he looks familiar to you, Mike, that's because he was the mysterious Romani character in Dracula Untold. He's the guy who brought Dracula back from the dead.
This is the somewhat Renfield character that we got in that movie. Yeah, that I asked you like 3 movies ago. Is he the Scorpion King yet?
Peter Mensah plays Nebsarek, the Nubian God King. Mensah is a Ghanaian British actor and the son of an architect, engineer, and a writer. He actually studied engineering and worked for British Gas in Canada before working professionally as an actor. He's had prominent roles on Spartacus, True Blood, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and has had minor roles in a number of high-profile films, including Avatar, 300, 300 Rise of an Empire, Tears of the Sun, Jason X, and The Incredible Hulk. You know, for those of us who are really excited to see Gladiator 2 this December, he will also be in that in an unnamed role.
Oh, very nice. I recognize this guy a lot. He's a really cool actor. He's got a really cool look, and I love Jason X. So, and I was thinking, like if I had a shot at this Scorpion King thing, I like the idea of him kind of just skipping through time until he gets back to his own zone. And he's been to space, he's been to the future, he's been to modern day, and then he ends up back in some tomb in ancient Egypt.
Actually, that would be pretty amazing. I would love to see that.
Get The Rock on the line. I got him an idea.
Pearl Thusi plays Tala. Thusi is a South African actress and model. Her first TV role was in an episode of BBC and HBO's The #1 Ladies Detective Agency. And since then, she's worked as a TV presenter, was a series regular on the ABC series Quantico, and she appeared in a few feature films, including Tremors 5, Bloodlines, Bulletproof 2, and Netflix's Fistful of Vengeance. So again, she's got that Mike Elliott connection.
Don't think I've seen any of those.
Mei Ling Ing plays Kensa. Ing is a British actor of Singaporean Chinese descent. She has also appeared in Wonder Woman and the Suicide Squad. And in addition to her acting, she also works as a personal trainer, a fitness model, and an entrepreneur, having opened 3 restaurants in Spain, as well as a personal training company in Singapore. Yeah, I was watching the back half of this movie with my partner, and she took one look at this woman and was like, she is ripped. What does she do when she's not acting? And I was like, oh, she's a fitness model and a personal trainer. And she was like, that tracks.
All the women in this are ripped and kicking ass. Well, maybe not the sorceress that is not the book, not the actual Book of Souls, who's like an actual person, which cool twist. I like that. But like her, the one Tala, and even like the Lady Hawk with the eagle, they all have like predominant, pretty badass roles in the movie, and I thought that was cool. But this one, the Mei Ling, her character is like fierce and pretty scary. Actually, to be quite honest, I was like, yeah, I'd fall in line.
I love that the lead hench person is a woman. Usually in these movies, we see like a big strong man. Ing Beckman plays Mennefer the priestess, who you just referred to. There's virtually no information about her on the internet. But one fun detail I did find in her credits was that she was in a 2022 Netflix show called Ludic with Arnold Vosloo, the mummy. So like, that's pretty cool.
Weird. There's so much Netflix that I'm not aware of and TV shows that exist that I have no clue about. But what was cool about her and Peter Mensah, like the group,
Yes.
Mensah?
Peter Mensah. Yeah.
The cool things about their characters, they got some awesome eyes. They get to wear the cool contacts. Even like their voices are affected with like some kind of device and stuff. So like that was cool.
Considering I couldn't find much information about who she is, she turns in a pretty solid performance. I wish she had a little more screen time. She's pretty awesome in this. It's a very Conan detail to have like a female sorceress or a priestess kind of character.
Well, I was thinking of 2 things. One was definitely Game of Thrones, where they have like the wargs, right? So like there's like dudes who can see through their creature that like flies around or runs around, and they share a brain. And so she's kind of like that. But then also in He-Man, the Empress or the sorceress in that is like a bird lady. So like there's always like a connection in my mind for some reason between like a sorceress and like some kind of bird representation.
Howard Charles plays Uruk, the son of Kali and the leader of The Black Arrows. Charles is a British actor of stage and screen, appearing in a number of classic stage productions, lots of Shakespeare, including Macbeth, Merchant of Venice, Twelfth Night, Measure for Measure, etc. He's only done a handful of movies, believe it or not. He's more of a TV actor, appearing in quite a few series for the BBC, and the most noteworthy of which would probably be The Three Musketeers from 2014.
Whoa, there was a Three Musketeers series? Like a TV show? No way. What is this on? Peacock? Like I said, man, I've missed so much, but okay. It looks awesome.
One of the strengths of this movie, as we're discovering here, so many of the actors are like really good actors. You know, their characters are a little bit goofy at times, but like I don't get the sense that anybody is ill-equipped for the performance. Nobody's phoning in these performances. They understood the assignment, and I think that really makes the difference. The only one who needed notes is our lead actor.
I know, that's so sad. It's unfortunate that we're saying that tonight, but you know, how rare do we ever dunk on anybody on this show? And
That's
it's
true.
like we say, like it's not that he's a bad actor, he just feels very out of place in comparison to everything else happening here.
Katie Louise Sanders plays Amina, the Book of Souls, and the daughter of Memtep. Saunders is another British actor with a list of credits that includes a lot of smaller British films and TV series, many of which I was unfamiliar with. However, very early in her career, she played cute girl number 1 in the Lizzie McGuire movie. So for all you Lizzie McGuire fans out there, this might be your movie.
Cool little role, the idea that the book is a person. I really like that.
Yep.
Concept, and then what needs to be done. There's sort of like I'm getting like there's almost like a Hellboy kind of, at least the Golden Army. I was getting vibes of Hellboy and the Golden Army, especially towards the end when we realized like how to break the curse and all that kind of stuff. Again, like this one was just like making me happier than previous episodes did. You know, I was like just vibing with this a little more than the others.
Definitely. And finally, Nathan Jones as Enkidu, the protector of Amina.
Hell yeah.
This actor gets a little bit longer of a bio than some of the others, but you'll understand why. This guy has done quite a few things. You will recognize him when I explain to you who he is. Jones is yet another professional wrestler and a mixed martial artist turned actor. There's so many in these series of films. He was born in Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. As a teenager, he spent 7 years of a 16-year sentence in a maximum security prison for 8 armed robberies he committed between 1985 and 1987.
What?
Dude was a criminal, man.
Dude, but that's so young to do that hard time.
He was like later in the teenage years, like 17, 18 years old. But
still,
yeah.
Young. Yeah, man. Wow. I'm glad he reformed.
He was discharged in 1994, and he turned to powerlifting, where he began competing in strongman contests, and he earned the nickname Mega Man, which is one of the coolest nicknames.
I mean, it's a little weird because of the video game character is like a little puny little guy, but okay.
In the early 2000s, he was working his way through various wrestling promotions, including World Wrestling All-Stars, Pro Wrestling 01 Max, and did ultimately make it to the WWE for 1 year, where he was put into a storyline as The Undertaker's protege.
The Overtaker?
He left the WWE in 2003. He worked a couple of matches for some smaller promotions and ultimately retired in 2005, turning to acting full-time. Jones had made his film debut back in 1996 when Jackie Chan specifically requested him for First Strike after seeing him lift and push a car down a street on Good Morning Australia.
Wow. All right. Way to go, Jackie. Jackie always reaching out like that. Very
yes.
Cool.
And then 8 years later, he appeared in Troy with Brad Pitt.
Oh, okay.
More recently, however, we probably all know him for his performance as Rictus Erectus in Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa.
I had a brother, and he was perfect. Perfect in every way. Oh, man, those movies are amazing. Oh, he's also in the Momoa Conan movie, so ties there as well. Yeah, this guy is a presence. Even under all the Gollum makeup, I was like, I kind of feel like I recognize this. What do I know this guy from? And like, he is able to emote so much under that stuff. It feels like skin at points where it's just like they just got like some rock creature to play the part. And like, I'm not even joking, you know, like a lot of these movies they didn't have a lot of time or money for makeup effects and costumes, but this guy is in there almost the whole movie, at least like half the movie, and bright daylight at times.
Yep.
showing off the makeup and costume and stuff. So I was quite impressed by that.
I love how much he looked like Psycho Gorman. Have you seen
Oh
Psycho
yeah,
Gorman?
he's like Psycho Gorman meets like an orc or something like that, like an Urukai warrior or some shit. But yeah, Psycho Gorman, man, great movie.
But like super sensitive too. That's maybe my favorite thing about him as a character is that he's like a cowardly lion, but he looks great. I agree with you. Unlike the previous, at least one, probably two Scorpion King movies where we can really feel that they don't have as much money as they would like to really make these movies look really good. Somehow this movie looks better than both of them and pulls off some really cool practical effects. And there's really good location shots. I wasn't able to figure out where they shot this. That information wasn't available. Clearly, they picked some really good locations, some parts of the world, no idea where. And they just, I guess, made the budget work for them. I can see every dollar up on that screen. So props to them for putting together such a good looking movie.
I just keep thinking that they worked within their boundaries. Like they knew what they could accomplish and they didn't really try and do more than they could handle, unlike other movies where it just, like the last one with all the contraptions and all of the mechanics and all this, and it just started to get a little puppety and like, I don't know, by the end of that, it was kind of worn out with the anti-gravity suits and everything.
Right.
Just like you can almost see the strength. And it's like, I'd rather not push it if we don't have to, like we talked about in the past, how many great ideas they slammed into these things, but how hard it is to execute them based on the means that they are working with. And here they're like, hey, like, let's just do what we're capable of. And it almost feels like they could have gone an extra step at the end, i.e. shown the Scorpion King transform into the Scorpion Monster. But like, other than that, I was like, yeah, man, like you guys knew what you were doing this time. Like
that does it for the cast. I have no production notes to speak of, unfortunately, this time. So let's just dive right into the movie.
Yeah.
I want to note two things before we get into the story here. We have what might be the coolest variation of the Universal logo that we have seen so far. I cannot believe we have not seen this done before, but the entire thing bathed in like this gold bronze kind of light looks super cool. I mean, it's not complicated, right? They just changed the color of the lighting, but just looks really badass. Love that.
I mean, instantly, it's crazy how much you can accomplish just by messing with the logo.
Yeah.
It kind of sets your state of mind without realizing it before the movie even starts.
Absolutely. I saw that and I was like, oh shit, I'm on board. Like whatever it is, give it to me. And then immediately undercut by the papyrus font on the opening credits.
Well, I feel like they even mention papyrus throughout the movie. When they're looking at the scrolls, they're like, check the papyrus.
As soon as I saw it was a Universal 1440 Entertainment in papyrus, I thought, shit, god damn it.
Like Ryan Gosling, like they brought it back.
Okay, so like every Scorpion King and Mummy movie, we get a little prologue to set us up the world of the film we're about to inhabit for the next hour and 40 minutes. This one is set in ancient Egypt. The prologue tells the story, this narrator voice tells the story of King Memtep, an ancient Egyptian ruler who made a pact with the Egyptian god of the underworld, Anubis, to create a sword that was so powerful that whoever possessed it would rule the world. They named this sword the Fang of Anubis, and it has this magical ability to collect the souls of everyone it slays. We learn, I can't remember if we learn it in the prologue, but we certainly learn it later in the film, but everyone who is killed by this sword, their names are forever written in the Book of Souls.
Yeah.
And so the sword and the Book of Souls are going to be sort of connected. They have this like magical connection. You can't have one without the other. And so that'll be key for the climax.
So just a couple quick notes I had right out of the gate. We've seen cool swords in the world of the Scorpion King before, so I was good with that. I always love a magical sword, whether it be Excalibur or what have you, make something up. I don't care. Like, tell me it's powerful, set it on fire, and like, let's go kick some ass. But this sword in particular, I was like, where have I heard this before? And unfortunately, there is like a DC character named Katana who has like a cursed sword, and when she kills you, your soul gets like sucked into the sword or something. I think there's one in Marvel Universe too. But that doesn't bother me. I just thought it was cool that we got a sword, and the connection to the Book of the Souls is nice because Dan, Book of Souls is like, that's a giant reference. So very cool to sort of see the origins of where all that's coming from.
Yeah, and the prologue continues, introduces the character of Nebsarek, who plunders the tomb of King Memtep in order to steal his sword, the Fang of Anubis. He is basically tearing across the Middle East, conquering kingdoms, building up his army, and he has one goal, really, which is to find the last Akkadian, because years ago, the Akkadians wiped out his people. And so he is sort of on this quest for vengeance after that, to avenge his ancestors and slay the descendant of the Akkadians.
Yeah. The sword makes him power hungry and insane, and his
Yep.
eyes glow red, and his voice gets deeper like Darth Vader. And every time he steps, like there's a thud and a rumble, like you're in the IMAX theater. It's quite cool though. I like it. And every time you see the sky above his head, it's moving really fast. That's a cheap effect, but I really dig it. It's like that 300 effect almost.
I love this setup. It's really simple, straightforward, and we know exactly where this guy's coming from. And honestly, there's a little bit of an empathy to him. I understand why he's coming from Matthias, right? So I don't think the film really is all that interested in exploring that side of him. He just kind of is a colorful villain through the whole thing. But I love that element exists, because it does make him inherently a little more complicated, more interesting.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not interested in sympathizing or making him an empathetic character. Like, he's pure evil, even though he has a right in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not wrong. Like, Matthias's people wiped out his people and he's the last survivor. So it's like, it's happened to Matthias too. Like, his people got wiped out and he was the last of his kind. So he went on a vengeance quest. Like, it happens. It's just that the sword is corrupting him.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the emphasis here instead of anything else, really. So there is a bit of a one note at play with a lot of the characters, which is okay for the scope of this movie. If I'm fine with it.
Yeah. And then we're reintroduced to Matthias, who has once again sort of abandoned his Scorpion King responsibilities.
Dude, he had the blonde girl from the last movie and her king father and the feast, and Lou Ferrigno showed up and he's like, we're friends again. And it's like he walked away from all of that. Now he's basically living next door to Jesus.
Yep.
Like, it's a Jesus town. There's nothing there. He's a blacksmith. There's no iron or ore. It's all like wood. He should be a farmer. Like, this is banana pants.
And he's not making weapons anymore. He's a blacksmith, not making weapons. He's making like scythes and farming equipment, right? He's kind of given up the way of the warrior. He no longer makes instruments of death.
Well, to be fair, like blacksmiths, it's not like they only make guns or swords. They,
Right.
they shoe horses and, fix wagons and that kind of crap. Fair enough that he doesn't have like a whole bunch of like weapons on the wall, like Hattori Hanzo. And he's like, I've given this up, even though I made 50 of them.
But at the end of the day, he's still making like scythes and shit. So, which comes in handy in the next sequence. We are also introduced to his friend Abel, who is a child in the town, who I think knows he was the Scorpion King or suspects he was the Scorpion King.
He'll never find out.
No. But as they are having a sweet moment, Kensa, Nebsarek's #1, shows up with her men and starts some shit with Matthias. Brings out the old Scorpion King.
Yeah, they find him with the bird girl finds him. She like sends the bird out.
Yeah.
At the beginning, because I was like, how did they find him so quick? And then there's a shot of the bird. I was like, oh, that's right. Actually, wow, this movie's like knows what it's up to.
And it's a pretty cool, every fight scene in this movie is pretty much hand-to-hand combat, but all of it is pretty well choreographed, I think. Matthias also ultimately loses this fight. It's multiple people against one. They do defeat him and take him prisoner and execute his friend Abel, the little child.
Yeah, that was luckily we don't see it, obviously. It happens off camera, but like he sees it, and it's pretty brutally depicted. Like, I was surprised that they killed a child character. Like, this kid is like definitely under 10.
Oh yeah.
In the movie, And the other thing is, while they're fighting, like, does it start snowing? Is it like snowing, or is that just supposed to be like stuff kicked up as like dirt? But I was like, something's going on. This is weird.
Could be like dust or ash. So now Matthias is taken prisoner and being carted back to Nebsarek's camp. But fortunately, he is intercepted by who we will find out is Tala. She is a
Yeah.
Nubian warrior and the daughter of Balthazar, the king of Nubia.
That sounds familiar.
Yes, that's because he was played by Michael Clark Duncan in The Scorpion King.
Hell yeah.
So-
That's so crazy that they took it all the way back.
Yes. I was like, hang on a second, Balthazar, was that Michael Clark Duncan? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. So this movie's actually going to connect characters to that first movie, which is pretty cool.
I mean, this may as well be the second one, right? Like nothing in between otherwise is going to come up.
You could, on a script level, you could go first Scorpion King, then this one, ignore everything else, and
Call it a day.
You could also put the second one in there because that's a prequel.
Yeah.
Poor Victor Webster, he made 2 movies and we actually pretty much enjoyed his performances. But yeah, I think that this movie kind of ignores a lot of the adventures in between. I kind of like it for that.
I like this character a lot. I mean, she kind of like, I'm getting again in Conan, like the Grace Jones character
yeah.
a little bit, like the warrior queen in that kind of situation, and just badass, doesn't take any of his shit either. I also just appreciate that I think throughout this entire movie, there's like no romance between anybody.
Nope.
Anyone, and everyone's gorgeous, like man and woman, like everybody's beautiful, and they all are like repelled from each other. Like, they want nothing to do. Maybe we can't see it, but like they smell. They probably just smell, and they don't want to get too close, right? I mean, I always think about that watching these old movies that take place back then before deodorant existed.
Oh, definitely.
But this is a cool sequence because like she breaks him out, she like steals him.
Yeah.
From the bad guys, and then heals him with Scorpion. Dude, I was like slow clapping in my mind. I was like, yeah, they're getting into it now. Like they know what to do. Like it might feel and seem cheesy, but this is what you got to do with the character. You got to have him be the friend of scorpions and that kind of shit. You just got to do that.
Yeah, it's some real superhero stuff. Having him have like some sort of connection to the insects, right? Like I kind of like that, and I don't think the other sequels really played that up as much as this one does. I kind of love that element here.
I wanted them to. I remember me like complaining that he's not friends with like the creepy crawlers and stuff. So that was an issue. Oh, and now here's another thing, Dan.
Yeah,
he's a demigod.
Apparently.
He's referred to a lot in this movie. He's like, you are Scorpion King. You are a king, a demigod, a warrior. I'm like, is he?
I feel like that was just hearsay, like the legend of the Scorpion King spreading. You know how things just evolve over time?
Yeah. I'm assuming like Hercules is really running around out there in his universe, and like Perseus, like real demigods, because like Zeus probably exists. Like I think we've even seen a couple of them in the second movie when they went to Greece.
Right. I can definitely envision like Anubis exists in the reality of this movie. So yeah, I could see like Hercules running around, but whether it's true or not, I mean, I don't know. I kind of like this idea that these stories travel and they evolve, and by the time you get back to the source, it barely resembles the truth, right? So yeah, I definitely could see this legend of the Scorpion King spreading across the land, and suddenly she's face to face with a flesh and blood man who's just a man. It's all he's ever wanted to be, is just a guy and mind his own business, and she's heard stories about how he's this demigod, right? So now he suddenly has this legacy to live up to, which is a lot of pressure for anybody.
Although he did get shot with like 5 arrows and survive and like get dragged halfway across the desert, and like she shows up and she's like flicking the arrows. She's like, you still there? So who knows?
So we learn a little bit from Tala. Again, she's the daughter of Matthias's old friend Balthazar. She knows that Nebsarek is headed towards Nubia, and she needs his help to stop Nebsarek from enslaving her people, to ultimately bring peace to Egypt. And so she knows that they have to find this Book of Souls because it holds the secret to destroying the Fang of Anubis. And so then that becomes the quest, is to find this Book of Souls and then save the people of Nubia from Nebsarek and his army.
Dude, the best is now Matthias has a catchphrase this movie where he's like, oh, I hate quests.
Yeah, they're always like 1,000 times more difficult than you think.
He's not wrong. He's like all the side quests.
Yeah.
Like, you just look at like Red Dead Redemption or something like that. It's like, go do this thing, and then it's like 7 side quests later.
Right.
It's like, I finally here. It's like, oh, you're too late.
They start making their way towards the Temple of Scrolls.
There's a valley of the book that she knows about across the wastelands, and
Yeah.
she starts telling this crazy story that sounded, again, awfully familiar, where she's like, okay, here's the deal. It's like the book can only be read in moonlight on a certain day at a certain time. And I'm like, has she been talking to dwarves recently? Because that is exactly what happens in The Hobbit, where they have to like go to the mountain, the lonely mountain, at a certain day, at a certain time, and read in the moonlight, and only then will the magic keyhole appear or some bullshit. And it's like, come on, I'm all right with it, but it's just funny, right? It's the same thing.
They have to get to the Valley of the 13th Moon. And along the way, they travel through this saltland kind of area, which is pretty neat. And they're captured by the Black Arrows.
Yeah, the Rain of Arrows is cool.
Yeah, they're super cool. Like, Matthias knows they're there. He knows they're before we see them. I love the volley of arrows that comes through. But basically, like, if they meant to hit them, they would have. So it was like a warning. And eventually they are captured for trespassing. Uruk has every intention of killing Matthias and taking Tala for himself and all that bullshit. But Matthias appeals to his hunter nature and manages to like bargain with him and allow Matthias to kind of be hunted at like any other prey. And if he survives, then he and Tala can go free.
Yeah, they played the most dangerous game. They're going to be hunting human. I was so happy. That's like one of my favorites.
Yeah.
How can you resist that? The ultimate catch. Sure.
And I love that moment where Uruk says he'll send 4 of his best men, and Matthias is like, you better make it 5. So it's a really cool moment where Uruk fires an arrow out into the field, and as soon as Matthias passes that arrow, then he becomes the hunted. That's the deal. And over the course of this sequence, really cool sequence, I was impressed that Matthias could hide anywhere because the area looked so flat, but he manages to defeat all 5 of them, but he lets them all live. He doesn't kill any of them. And in doing so, earns the respect of Uruk and the Black Arrows. He says something like, in order to receive mercy, one must show mercy, or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's all about sort of like building relations and being diplomatic. And it's like, when I get in trouble later in the movie, you'll come help me. That's what we're all about right now and everything. But what I did like, though, is that Scorpion King did one of his patented arrow dodges.
Yes.
That was cool. No catapult in this movie, though. So I was a little bummed about that we don't wheel that out towards the end. But this is cool. Like, I like that the Scorpion King has sort of a history of like trespassing to get somewhere he needs to.
Yep.
Running into the group that controls the land and then befriending them and like becoming allies and sort of building his world around that, right? Like, it sort of happened in every movie. In the last one, they went through the Lost Woods and found those people. And I feel like before that, and even with in the first movie with like Balthazar and stuff, like, didn't they start off as sort of enemies and at the end they became allies? So it's sort of following those similar patterns. Like, he's very good like that as a king.
Yeah, I imagine that's what made him a good king, is that his diplomacy skills are off the charts. I mean, he took an enemy in Michael Clarke Duncan in Balthazar, and by the end of that movie, Balthazar was wearing a dress. So you don't just convince somebody to wear a dress. They must have been tight by the end of that movie. So that's his superpower. As far as I'm concerned, like, yeah, he can fight. He's a really skilled warrior, but at the end of the day, his real superpower is like winning over potential enemies to his side.
Hearts and minds.
Which I find more plausible when the character is played like The Rock or Victor Webster, when they play the character kind of smarmy. Here, Zach McGowan is just like so serious, it's difficult to buy that they would befriend him so quickly.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like the kind of Scorpion King you can share a beer with. And
right.
Like, yeah. Or like tell a joke to, or like insult and give him a good ribbon or anything. This guy takes everything way too seriously. It's like, you gotta chill, man.
With the Black Arrows on their side, Tala and Matthias continue through the wilderness, ultimately making their way to the Temple of Scrolls. And Tala has this staff, right? Well, let me back up a second. The Temple of Scrolls is marked by this gate that just exists.
The Pillars of the Moon.
Yeah, it just exists out in the middle of the desert. They pass through it, nothing happens.
It's like a little Stonehenge kind of situation. Now, Dan,
Yeah,
have you ever played Minecraft by any chance?
a little bit.
Are you aware of the gateway to the Nether
I am
in
not.
that? Okay, so you basically build a little archway which looks exactly like this, and then you my nephew told me all this, and then you tap it with some element that you have in your game, and it opens up a doorway to another part of the game, and you go through it, and it's like the dark dimension of Minecraft or what it's the Nether world.
Sure.
It's exactly this.
Yeah.
So I'm just letting you know. I was like, this is so great. It's like live action Minecraft. They beat Jack Black to it. That's so funny.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
it works really well within the context of the movie. It's very weird. It's very magical,
Uh-huh.
hidden out in the middle of nowhere.
Tala explains that you can only access it once like every blue moon, so like every
Mhm.
3 years at a specific time in a
Yeah.
specific place. They have to walk like 400 paces in one direction to this little platform. Now this particular sequence I think is really neat. It reminds me of it's like a reverse version of that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark in the map room when Indy harnesses the power of the sun to find the spot where he needs to dig to get to the Well of Souls. And so here she's got this like staff, it goes in the ground, the moon comes out, she harnesses the moon's power in some way, and suddenly this gate that is just chilling in the middle of the desert starts to glow, and you see what they call, I think, like a quicksilver sort of pathway, which is there to protect from evil spirits or something like that. Now they can access this tomb. It's kind of like a tomb.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I would call it a tomb, because like a person lives down there with no one else and like all of their little belongings and stuff and no one else. Yeah, it's a cool little tomb.
This is supposedly the resting place of the Book of Souls. And this might be one of my favorite sequences in the movie. We are first introduced to Enkidu, the golem, which is pretty funny. It's like pretty cool, like little fight sequence, but ultimately harmless because, as we will learn, he is more ally than a foe. And he is protecting this beautiful woman, Amina, who lives in this area as well.
So quickly on the golem,
Yeah.
have you seen the silent film Golem?
No, it's one of those movies always on
Okay.
my list.
Okay, it is very interesting because it's like a Jewish fairy tale
Mhm.
creature, the golem created out of clay and then fed instructions and so forth and doing the bidding, but like it is so influential, I feel, on Frankenstein.
Yes.
Of the Frankenstein story, that it is so interesting to see one show up in a Universal monster movie like this. It just feels like almost as if like Nosferatu
Mhm.
showed up in a Universal movie, because it just, not that it is, but it just feels like the unlicensed version of Frankenstein's monster sometimes, because it was there before Frankenstein's monster, quite frankly. But like, I don't know, I just thought that was a very interesting addition to this entire sort of lore of the Scorpion King.
No, it definitely is. And I hadn't even considered that original Golem film as, being similar to Frankenstein. And then, thinking about it, this movie in that context. So thank you for bringing that up. I think more of golems when it comes to like Sword and Sandal fantasy kind of stories. Golems are monsters in like Dungeons and Dragons. And so that's kind of what I was taking away from this golem. Well, I was thinking more D&D because there are stone golems, there are flesh golems, there's fire golems. There's all sorts of golems made from different materials, but they all are similar in that they are imbued with magical ability and are usually protectors of some kind.
Well, if you want to watch the 1915 silent film, I think it's up on YouTube there in all of its glory. So it's a pretty cool movie.
This golem, very un-Frankenstein, like I sort of mentioned before, he is kind of like a cowardly lion.
Well, they both hate fire.
They both hate fire.
Fire
Yep. In this scene, we meet Amina, and she is revealed to be the Book of Souls. It's a really neat reveal. She sort of insists that she has no books, she has scrolls, she has codexes or codices.
Papyrus.
Yeah, she has read all of these different things, but doesn't have any books.
Yeah, it's like the end of Fahrenheit 451, where the colony like all memorized the books.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like that. They're like, there's nothing written down. It's all up here.
But Matthias, intentionally or not, manages to get Amina to show her hand, literally. As her arm passes through the moonlight coming into the room, the text starts to appear on her arm, and then eventually her entire body.
Crazy, Dan,
Mhm.
because visually, we just saw this in 2017 with The Mummy.
Yes.
She had this stuff written all over her body. She looks exactly like that. This is just the very next year, and they're like, you know what? Like, it might not have worked with Dark Universe, but we're pulling it into the Scorpion King universe.
The characters looked very similar. I want to say probably Sumerian in both cases. That was a really interesting coincidence as well. I have no idea if the producers and writers of Book of Souls had any idea that was coming down the pike in 2017, because surely this was in production before that came out.
It makes more sense for it to be written on this character than the other characters, because we never found out that those were like protection spells or whatever written on the mummy, but at least we know what these are. Like, these are the names of the people killed by the sword of the fang of Anubis.
Yes, it's very similar in concept to like the Illustrated Man, if memory serves, right? Like the Ray Bradbury character.
Where his tattoos like kind of come to life and tell stories. They're not tattoos, they're skin illustrations.
So now the plan changes a little bit. Now that the Book of Souls is a person, she is a person who is under a curse of her own. Matthias sympathizes with her and vows to rid her of this curse. And they know that the only way to find the secret to that is to get to the tomb of Memtep, where the Fang of Anubis was located originally.
Now, Dan, this place that they go, is this the same place that they go to in The Mummy 2? Is this the same like hidden valley that the Scorpion King ends up locked away in at the end?
I don't think so.
Okay, there's a lot of hidden valleys and stuff to keep track of, so I was just trying to keep this one straight in my head. For some reason, it sounded familiar, Amanesh or something like that. Or
if you're keeping track of the geography here, Amina tells them that they have to get to Memtep's tomb, located beneath the city of Amanesh. And the way to get there is to basically catch a ferry in Aqaba and take it across the sea to Amanesh. First, they have to get out of this secret tomb area. The problem is that Enkidu has been sort of tasked with keeping Amina there and to protect her from harm. We know he's afraid of fire, and so Matthias comes up with this plan to trick Enkidu and sort of seal him in that room with like a wall of flame as they escape through the tunnel.
Which is very easy to do. He's very gullible. And then they bring the book out into the daylight, and like, she's been down there since before she could walk, so she hasn't really seen the sun or the sky or any of that stuff. So we get a minute for her to like bask in it all and take it all in.
Yeah, and it's actually a pretty beautiful moment, but cut short when Nebsarek's men find them, and there's like 7 of them. Matthias and Tala just go ham, basically take them all out.
Also, the Golem shows up.
Yes.
Like, he escapes his little prison to come save the book and be like, I'm still gonna protect you, you know, like, I can still do it. He like comes up and like kills a bunch of the bad guys, and then he does something which earned the movie one of its stars.
He punches a horse.
He decks this horse so hard, man. Wham! And they're like, no. He's like, what did I do? Like, we don't punch horses. We only kill bad guys. He's like, well, I'm sorry, you know, I'm just made of clay here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to consider that, you know, Amina has never stepped foot outside of this room, but neither has he. So he has no idea what anything is. He just sees this horse and just punches it right in the face. It is laugh out loud funny.
And now I'm wondering why he's not looking up at the sky screaming in terror because of the sun. If this guy is so afraid of fire, there's a big ball of it up in the sky. He never looks up and he's like, "Wow, what's going on?" And like tries to bury his head in the sand. That never happened.
After this fight scene, I think there's another fight scene in the town before they get on the boat. That's when Kensa and her men locate him.
Yeah, there's like a sneaky sort of sequence where they're all sneaking around and Scorpion King gets his veil stolen by what I can only assume are the street walking prostitutes. Like, what was that? They just threw that in there. It's like, hey, baby, looking for a date? He's like, no, get away from me.
So there's an ambush, another pretty awesome fight fight sequence here.
More arrow dodging.
They do manage to hop on a boat and get away to safety.
I was getting Aquaman vibes, the new one, not the second one, but the first one with Jason Momoa. There's
Sure.
That Italy action sequence where they're fighting on the roofs and he like falls through and he's like, "Scusi." I'm getting that vibe. And then at the end of this, where he does like the huge leap onto the cart, like it reminded me of like a car jumping onto a boat or something. Like it was so crazy. Like he just takes this flying jump off of the roof and lands on the cart.
I'll say this for this movie is that these sequences, they have some standout moments, right? Like, and I think they're well shot, well executed, and they don't take away from the fight sequence. They give him these hero moments that look really good, and they don't overdo it, right? That particular shot, I think, is really well earned.
Yeah, dude, we have sort of talked about like the exhaust of watching too much fighting in a lot of these Scorpion King movies, and these guys are like on the clock. They're like, nope, time to end this fight. You know, it's over. Whoever's still alive, you'll fight in the next fight in another 15 minutes. You know, like, there's no need to carry this on. We got it.
So they get on the boat. There's a sequence where, so we know Amina can feel every single name that is inscribed onto her body, every soul that has been taken by the sword. She has this vision where she sees King Tarka killed by Nebsarek, and we learn that this was Tala's brother back in Nubia. Now she is the queen of Nubia.
That's a pretty cool idea for a sequence, like to reveal information. You know, it's like these, like suddenly she's like, I don't know if it happens exactly like this, but she like gets a shiver and she's like, oh, someone else just died. You know, like there's a new name written on me, and they're like, what is it? And it's like, it's your brother.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like that. And it's like, now you're queen. And it's like, they're just finding out. And like, they're at a really low point on a boat escaping, just had all these battles. Like I really like that moment.
And it tells everybody where Nebsarek is, right? He has reached Nubia. We know he has reached, in all likelihood, enslaved those people.
How is it that Scorpion King 5 can be more efficiently written than parts of Beetlejuice 2?
And these co-screenwriters have no other credits.
This is their only movie. Get them on the horn. Make more movies. Make more.
They finally reach Amanesh. They get into the tomb of Memtep. They begin to try to find this secret to the sword and the curse for the Book of Souls and all of that.
We get like a recap, right? She tells the Anubis story again, but we get like a lot of the opening footage again because it's kind of cool. It was pretty cool. Well,
sort of. They deduce that the secret they're looking for is likely hidden inside this Sphinx statue. It's specifically a male Sphinx, which means that it is like a protector of like secrets or information or something like that. Matthias breaks it open and they find this big parchment.
Written in papyrus.
That's where we get the prologue again. But what we learn is that basically Amina is the daughter of King Memtep.
Way back in the day.
Yes.
The first guy to create the Sword of the Fang of Anubis.
When he made the deal with Anubis,
she would become the book. The idea is like you get this crazy sword, and every time you kill someone, their soul gets sucked out of them and written in a book. But the catch is the book is actually your daughter, and she's cursed that way. So the only way to lift that curse is to kill your own daughter with the Sword of Anubis.
Right. It's a real deal with the devil kind of situation. Memtep, being a good dad, cannot bring himself to kill his own daughter. And so he kills himself instead. And then his name ends up on her body somewhere, presumably.
Pretty impressed that he had the sanity to hide his daughter like successfully forever. Like no one's been able to find her until today.
Right.
So it's been thousands of years. Had this golem protector for her, a safe place for her to be, and then takes himself out of the equation too, right? Like doesn't go on to be some kind of mad tyrant, realizes maybe I could stop this before it goes any further, or at least his part of the play ends himself. Again, like, it's kind of cool. Like, and then down the line, this sword ends up where it is, and the cycle continues. You know, it just picks up again, and people have just kind of forgotten where it all began, and that there even is a curse on the book, and that the book's even a person.
Right. This is a lot of information that Nebsarek does not have. He knows that Matthias is going for the book, but, doesn't know where it is, doesn't know how to get it, none of that information. His only focus is just to kill Matthias. And so just as they discover all of this information, his warriors, Kensa and her men arrive and capture Matthias and Tala and Amina and Kidu. They are taken prisoner and carted to Nebsarek's camp, which pretty sure was in Nubia, along with the rest of the Nubian army or the Nubian villagers. And so Matthias is chained up like Samson, right? He's like between these two giant rocks. Matthias like challenges him to like fight honorably, right? Like they're not gonna like we're not just gonna kill him, right? We're gonna have like an honest to goodness fight to the death. But of course, Nebsarek, being the villain, makes sure to cut Matthias's side with the sword.
I like though how like his jackals are like, just kill him now. It's like the Scott Evil argument where he's like, you got him right there. I'll get a gun. Bam. We'll kill him now. And he's like, no, I want him to be at his best. Like, I want a fair fight. And it's like, what? Just take him out. But like, I get it.
Yeah, he's a power-hungry god king who still has some semblance of honor somewhere deep down and refuses to take the easy win.
I love this too, is that he finds out that Amina's the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, burn the book. We're gonna have a book burning. And you have like a simultaneously like sort of like burning a witch visual, and also the book burning Nazi stuff kind of thing, right? So it like all combines. Like, I gotta say, Dan, this one is a good one.
What is it with tyrants and information? They really hate books.
Well, they want to control information,
well, of course.
Right? They want to make it up and be the ones, and the only ones that know everything.
And this particular book poses a threat to his power. So yeah, I totally get his motivation here.
Wouldn't she have run out of room by now? She should have like 4 arms and like 3 legs.
Magic, Mike.
I know. They're being written on the inside too.
At the same time all this is happening, Tala and Enkidu are in like this like makeshift prison cell, and they're with all of the other Nubian slaves. And she reveals that she is Tala, daughter of Balthazar, and their queen, and basically rallies the troops.
Yeah.
At the same time, the Black Arrows, who had just seen them sort of carted back through the wasteland, have arrived and are prepared to fight for Matthias and defeat Nebsarek as well.
And as Matthias is all chained up, he summons the power of the scorpion.
Well, does he summon the power of the scorpion, or is it Tala? Because
I feel like it was probably Tala at first, being like, I did this earlier. I'm going to try this again. And then it seems like way more show up than are supposed to.
Yeah.
And it feels like he took over at one point, and they climb all over him. And it's a little silly looking because they're so small and there's so many of them, but you got to do it. This is what has to be done. And I appreciate it very much. I love it. The only thing I miss is that like he's not riding around on one later, or he doesn't become one. But like at least he gets stung by like 30 little baby scorpions, and he gets scorpion power, and he breaks his arms from the chains, and he has like the chains are still connected to his wrist, and now he's got big balls of rock connected to the end of the chains, and he's gonna like whip them around like wrecking balls. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is a wonderful visual of him using these improvised weapons to just wail on this jackal army.
Dude, it's super impressive idea for makeshift weaponry, because he's just pulling the chains out of the rocks and it's just what they were connected to. So it seems very practical, even if it's fantastical. But like, if you were to be able to do that, I could see this happening.
For sure. Let's see what else is happening. So the Tala is like hyping up Enkidu as well. Like, as we know, he is so afraid of fire, but somehow she has convinced him that the fire is not as important as protecting Amina from death, right? At this point, that's what he's facing, is her imminent death. And so she rallies the troops, they burst out of this prison, and they're doing battle alongside the Black Arrows against this jackal army.
Final showdown, man. I mean, we are in it now. It's nice. It's the home stretch, baby.
So as Matthias is fighting Nebsarek and Tala, she's kicking ass, Enkidu is stabbed at one point with the Fang of Anubis. And in order to protect Amina, he just falls into this giant pit of flames.
Yeah, he has the sword in his gut and he like pushes the dude away from him.
Yep.
And falls, does like a dead man fall, sort of like Ripley at the end of part 3, into the
Yep.
fire, and sacrifices himself. And then that's it. Like no one can get to the sword for the end of the fight either, because it's surrounded by flames. Like he can't even do like the summoning Mjolnir thing. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's the thing I didn't really understand about this moment, is that it doesn't destroy the sword. Because later Matthias is going to reach into the fire and pull it out. I have to wonder what was going through Enkidu's mind in this moment as he fell back into the flames. It didn't really accomplish much, is what I'm saying.
Well, it stopped Nesbirek from getting the sword back for a while.
Sure, it makes him vulnerable for enough time for Matthias to, eventually get the upper hand.
It's sort of like a sacrifice play, right? Like
Sure.
he got out so someone else could score.
All right, fair enough. And then that moment is actually really cool. Matthias and Nebsarek are kind of hand-to-hand. It's like hand-to-hand combat, right? No weapons. Yeah. As Nebsarek sort of launches Matthias backward into the fire, Matthias whips this chain like Ghost Rider and just pulls him straight into the pit.
Dude, that is a wild shot. Like it is such a well composed shot. I was not prepared for it, but like it's slow motion. It's just a one shot, like it's locked off. But what is happening? Like the action is insane. Like he just whips Nesbirek and it like goes around his throat and then he goes flying over, but it takes like forever, man. It is weird and cool and everything. And I was like, that is some moment, man.
It was a solid ending to that fight. Something I definitely didn't expect to see in such a low budget film like this. Definitely paid off in a very satisfactory way, in my opinion. Definitely agree with you there. In the final moments, with Nebsarek defeated, Matthias reaches back into the fire for the Fang of Anubis, the sword, and it takes forever for him to accept that he has to kill Amina with this thing. She's been living for a long time, and she's ready to be done.
He doesn't even do it. She like walks into it.
Yeah.
She like comes up to give him a kiss, and then he realizes that like she's been impaled by the blade and starts dusting away like Infinity Gauntlet style. Like,
she combusts into sand, disappears, and like that's kind of it. There's no real epilogue. There's no real resolution with Tala.
No, it just kind of cuts to the narrator and a shot of Scorpion King like riding over the dunes, and the narrator being like, and so the Scorpion King would one day go on to somewhat resemble Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He went on to do other stuff and eventually fought Brendan Fraser. That's kind of how loosely they end the movie. It's obviously not verbatim like that. That would be preposterous. I'm joking, but it felt like that. It felt very abrupt, where it's like commercial break, we're back, and it's like, so was the tale of Scorpion King Matthias. Like he had many names: blacksmith, demigod. I was like, I don't know those names. So yeah, they do a quick wrap up at the end and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, it's almost like they just didn't have an ending written, and they're like, we got to end this thing somehow. We got this B-roll of him riding across the desert on a horse. Let's just use that.
Did I appreciate that more than setting something up that's never going to happen, right? They've done that 3 times where it's like, and the Scorpion King went on with his new lady and this new land and all of his servants and subjects, and it was going to be great. And then the next movie starts and it's like, he's got nothing. He's like, he just lost everything. He's back to square one. But then at the end of it, it's like, and now he's going to settle down with this new lady and her kingdom and all of his subjects. And then the next one, he's like, now he's like living next door to Jesus and he's a blacksmith. He's got nothing. So at least they didn't set up shit,
I do love that it didn't end with him once again accepting that he's going to be king of something.
The only thing I would have accepted is a shot of him mutating into a scorpion monster. That's the only acceptable ending to this movie, and it's not going to happen. So in that case, just ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, not the most satisfactory of final moments, but I do agree with you that it's better than having him set up to be king again and just to undo it.
It already felt like the movie had ended properly anyway. So,
right.
They could have just like gone out without that epilogue-ish sort of narration or whatever. But, look, to have like that weakest of endings there is fine, because the rest of the movie, quite frankly, kind of rocked. It kind of does. Like, I gotta say, for what it is, like it might be like my favorite Scorpion King sequel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. After that first one, then there's this one. I'd be happy with those too. If I'm going to watch any of them again, it's definitely going to be that first one, maybe this one.
Oh, I'll be watching the Dwayne The Rock Johnson one again for sure.
Absolutely. That does it for The Scorpion King, at least until Dwayne Johnson's reboot happens, if it
Never
happens.
say never. Never say never. When we were on Dread Central talking Wolfman and Dwayne Johnson was slated to play the Wolfman, I didn't chime in then because it slipped my mind that he's Scorpion King. That's all he gets to be in the Universal universe. So, like, either come back as Matthias or don't come back at all, Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. Okay, so do you have any final thoughts on The Scorpion King, either this movie or the franchise as a whole?
Well, the Scorpion King franchise is not a monster movie franchise in the sense that there is no, famous monster at the center of any of this stuff. Aside from that, it is a kind of cool, like, sword and sandal offshoot of all of it. It gets pretty close. I think part of the issue is, it's stuck in a certain area of the world, place and time. That's why I thought, like, maybe if he, like, time shifted to a bunch of different places or, like, made it a little further away from the cradle of civilization.
They did try to do that with the third one by heading east.
Norwayvania, yeah, and all that. Oh, and also, yeah, when they went to, like, Rome or Greece, yeah.
Yeah. So they definitely did try to take it out of Egypt. At what point does it stop becoming like a Scorpion King movie, right? You can't take him into like the New World, North America.
Yeah.
That would be strange.
I guess so. I know it hasn't even been discovered in that way necessarily when these movies are happening. Everything is still very native around the world. But again, for what they are, I think they're fun. If you're into this kind of stuff, if you're aware that, there isn't going to be any great effects or any great monsters, and that what you're getting into are just going to be a series of these quest films. But if you like that kind of stuff, I think there's enough here. If you like Lord of the Rings, if you like Legend of Zelda, if you like all the other things we referenced, the Marvel universe, it's just like all of these things are sort of pilfered and pillaged and picked apart and put back together to fit the context of Scorpion King. I think for me, what connects it most is just the general sense of the world of magic, right? Like there's a lot of magic, mysticism, and sorcery. I think that's the stronger points of it, the sorcery angle. Be aware that this is not the 30s and 40s black and white kind of stuff that
Right.
is so effective and all that. This is just very disposable for the most part, but still fun, just not essential whatsoever. Okay. But if you're curious, I feel like you could do a lot worse than a couple of these Scorpion King movies, and this was a genuinely good one. Like I for real think they went out on a high note here by, quite frankly, by going lesser, right? By pulling it back, by, working within their means and really pulling something off that I was quite impressed by. So all in all, Dan, I think this was a fun diversion. And I'm glad we ended up doing this.
Yeah, and like I said before, I do think it was an interesting experiment for Universal to try to create a brand new sort of IP, to build a franchise off of based on the monsters. It's an interesting choice for sure. Overall, it's sort of like a coffee table book, right? Where you see something on one page that you like, and you flip a page, maybe you don't like this, keep going, maybe you find something else you like. I don't think any particular installment of the Scorpion King movies is entirely representative of the whole. Each movie kind of tries something a little bit different. So while one or two may not work for you, two or three might work for you, or there might be elements throughout that speak to you. I think that's what you and I were doing largely through a lot of these, was kind of finding those elements that we recognized, like you said, like sort of pilfered from like other stuff that we like. And so, they're drawing from Lord of the Rings here, they're drawing from the Avengers there, or whatever. And so that makes it kind of a fun experience. I do also agree that these are non-essentials. You can go your whole life not watching any Scorpion King movies. Having watched all of them with you, I have zero regrets. I think it was a really fun way to break up this season for sure. I know we happened to do everything in chronological order. That allowed for us to like take little breaks between sort of the bigger tentpole movies. It's been a really fun, interesting season in that way. But yeah, I would say if you're not already interested in seeing the Scorpion King movies, they're probably not for you. I don't think they're going to win over somebody by accident.
I feel like talking about them is more fun than watching them.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There's something about seeing something and then having to figure it out with somebody else, right? Like having to discuss, like, what did I just watch? Like, can you help me make sense of this in my mind? And I feel like for the most part, like that's what these Scorpion King movies have been for me with you, Daniel. It's like I can count on the fact that you have also experienced what I'm watching, and I'm going to have the opportunity to sort of talk this out with you and get it straight in my mind, and then so I could finally move on with my life.
And isn't that on some level why we watch any movies at all?
Yeah, man. I mean, if you want to see someone's crazy point of view of the world, check out Scorpion King 4.
If you want to know what Barry Bostwick has been up to these days, check out Scorpion King 4. Okay, well, I think that about wraps us up for Scorpion King. Mike and I will be back on Friday, November 29th to discuss 2020's The Invisible Man, directed by Lee Wanell and starring Elizabeth Moss. In the meantime, you can follow us on X, aka Twitter, at MonsterMadePod. We're also on Blue Sky at MonsterMadePod and on Instagram and Facebook at The Monsters That Made Us. And you can email the show at themonstersthatmadeus@gmail.com. You can follow me pretty much everywhere online at Dan Cologne. Mike, where can listeners find you?
You can follow me online at _Mikester, MIKESTIR, and all the other shows I'm on at cageclub.me.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the show, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/themonstersthatmadeus. You can also support the show by giving us a 5-star rating and review, and we cannot forget about our t-shirts on TeePublic. You can find the link for that in our aforementioned Twitter and Instagram bios. For all other things Cage Club related, just head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Stay spooky, everybody, and happy Halloween.